Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Kingdom Echoes. Excuse me. I'm your host, Quentin, and today we're going to be covering some questions that I have kind of put together to kind of go through and talk about just me and I guess the book and, the whole idea behind it. Like, why did I do what I did with the story, the characters, all that. I'm assuming that's what this is going to be about since I'm kind of flying by the seat here, which is understandable. I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to go next as far as topic wise. And I thought this was a wonderful step away from that mindset and just kind of delve into quite a few different things. So the first thing I have here, the topic, why I started building the Seven Kingdoms and what called me to this world. So I have always been a fan of Power Rangers, which is currently on my TV right now, muted. But before that, more so, Batman, Superman, Thundercats, He-Man, all this stuff. So it really, really was an escape, right? So one day I decided to sit down and just start writing stuff. I didn't have a plan. There were no Seven Kingdoms yet. It was just character creation. So really, nothing called me to the world. It was more of a reverse, like the world was calling to me because I had such creative energy, which I still do, right? And I just wanted to put it into something that would keep me sane. Sane is a good word. And I was just a kid. I was just a teenager, but still, it was an escape. I had to get away from the environment that I was in that I was not comfortable with. So that's really the origin. Okay. So the lore behind that, I would say, is as far as the Seven Kingdoms goes. We already talked about what inspired me to start. Um, I wouldn't say there's a lot of emotional truth of mine behind it, more so than the story itself holds emotional truths of their past, and it really starts with Overlord Zula and the beheading of him and the creation of the Dragon King in the process of that whole ordeal that kind of pushes the story along because that is your beginning point. That's where you start. And then fast forward, boom, we fall right into a festival where there's a Team Dragon Force that's already established, and you kind of figure out who they are and what their deal is a little bit within that whole festival. You're not coming into their creation per se because that preface was kind of like their creation. But you come into this where they're already united and a team and they're just kind of doing their thing. And you can see a lot of, if you get the book and you look in the back of it, all that art that I did to create that is back there. All right. So let's talk about, I would say, the Queen Mother, Ariana. Let's break her down. So, the Queen Mother is the sister of the High King Donovan. Their last name is Christia, which is a holy name that is held at high regard throughout their family lineage. And now, with everything happening, she's already lost her mother, she's lost her father, and she lost her brother twice. Right? So she is really the only one holding up that name, even though she was married and had kids and all that fun stuff. She is the queen of another kingdom, because of that. So It's a lot involved in that. What happened to her husband, which you'll find out later about, possibly, if I decide to even explain that. Depends on how I feel. Everything's still kind of fresh and new. I will say that the next book is coming out the beginning, I would say the first quarter of next year, right? So the first quarter of next year, that book's coming out, and it will be directly connected to this one via the preface, right? And it tells its own story. You don't need the first book to see it, to read it, to follow along. It's self-contained enough to where from beginning to end, you are a part of the lead character's story and all the stuff that happens in that. And it's very different than this one. So look out for that. But in the moment, you get to see in that book, Ariana, when she is at a younger age. It's around the same time that she had a husband. And, there's kids and stuff. So it kind of gives you a sneak peek into her life at that point. But right now, all of her kids are grown and kind of doing their own thing, but she's just an overprotective mother, which is understandable. I have one of those. But yeah, that's Ariana. That's the Queen Mother, the Lady Dragon, as people love to call her. So as far as the world building, even though I didn't start with her, she seems to be the heart of it all, right? Maybe indirectly, because I'm all over the place in the book. I'm off on these tangents story-wise and try to pull them all together. But she seems to be at the heart of everything, in my personal opinion, when it comes to all of the stuff that's happening, because it all relates back to her brother, her lineage, all this stuff. Excuse me. So when you look at everything all together, and you ask yourself, how do you plan on keeping up with that? How many books are you going to write? How big is the story? I would say that is the writer's burden, and it's a burden of love. I mean, it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It is such a part of my heart that I think about it all the time. The stories. This is going to be, if I have anything to say about it, a 7-book series. Now, when I say books, I should clarify, right? Because some of these books have multiple volumes within it, right? Which kind of are being released as books. So, I'm not sure how many I'll have in total yet, but I know that 7 title-wise, it's 7 books. Anyways, that is my burden, and it's a lovely one. I've already gotten the story for like the next one, and the one after that is pretty solid, and the one after that is definitely where you would say, like, if you were to break it down to where you look at it, let's say at a Star Wars level, right? This would definitely be my Return of the Jedi moment in that last book. Or if you look at Anne Rice's what do you call her Rice verse, or I forget what the universe is called, right? But you have Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned, right? Which is a huge book, huge story-wise and reading-wise, right? But the ending of that book kind of culminates that story before it kind of like gets like a fresh coat of paint and starts venturing off into Lestat's other stories, right? I really think that's how this is going to be. It's that last book that I do, that's concrete story that I already have. Those are the ones that are kind of like that box set. Even though there's going to be more, these are kind of like, okay, this is what you need to start with, right? And that's the burden, is making sure that it all kind of flows together perfectly, and there's no real loose ends, or even though they're self-contained stories, right? They still all go together. And if you read them, you'll see that. You'll see that. Anyways, I really think that if I had a community, I don't know if I do or not. I really don't pay attention to that stuff. Maybe I should. But if I had a community, right, that was all in on how the stories are going, I think that it would be very niche. And I think that people will love it. It would be as beloved, in my personal opinion, as Star Trek or Star Wars or Thundercats or He-Man is, because that lore kind of like is there, and it has a place in their hearts. And I really hope that this gets to that point. Not really for financial gain per se, but because I love these characters so much that I would love for other people to also fall for them the way that I have. The next book has a main character who I really, really like. I think he might be my favorite. I think he might be my favorite. In the first book, Leo Cheetah, he's my favorite. I like the other ones, but Leo Cheetah's my favorite. He just reminds me so much of somebody who I won't name, but he is my favorite. And that doesn't mean that the person that he reminds me of is my favorite, but my character specifically is my favorite. So, but anyways, that was pretty fun. And even though I was flying by the seat of my pants a little bit, I feel good about it. We talked a lot about where I came from, where I'm headed, and a little bit of everything in between. We spoke about Ariana, the Lady Dragon, the Queen Mother, right? And her whole deal. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's probably a little, mono, kind of calm, kind of even keel. I may not sound like I'm excited, but I get really excited about this stuff. I really do. So, but thank you so much for coming along for the journey. I'm sorry, so sorry, that I have not released any videos in the last 2 weeks. Or has it been more than that? No, I think it's only been 2 weeks. Because the very last episode of the Free Your Mind Team Dragon Force series was that read-along that we were doing. And I stopped there at a certain point, and I took a little break. And now we're going to continue with this, where it's just talking about stuff, and we're going to eventually get to where we're doing some interviews with some very important people in my journey. I think the first one might be Mr. Robert Greene, whose name is in this book. Let's see here on that page. If you can see that page with my symbol on it, he's right underneath there, right? And you can see why his name is there, what characters he created, right? And we'll talk to him about just stuff, So that's coming down the road. But as of right now, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Toodles.